Warhens, welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magique. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined again by my genetically altered dog boy, sayer of the law and co-host,
Tyga, and the Mudlight. No, it's Alex Dandino.
All right, guys. As you know, this month's theme, the pod edits genetics. Tonight, just an absolute behemoth of a conversation ahead of us. Let's take a moment to get to some business. Guys, we dropped earlier this week on Tuesday our conversation we had with director Josh Lobo. He made a film called I Trap the Devil that we absolutely adore. You can find that anywhere. Go ahead and purchase that. Watch the movie. Listen to our episode on I Trap the Devil, and then go listen to Josh talk the green room with us, man. He is such an interesting guy. He had a lot of really interesting insights and things to say even outside of green room. It was a big, sprawling, fun conversation. Yeah. I hope you guys enjoy that.
It was really fun. He was great.
Yeah, man. He had that really good energy. But yeah, check out Josh's stuff. You can find him on Twitter everywhere. Find his movie I Trap the Devil. While you're at it. Oh, sorry. What were you saying?
I'm still reeling from that Ginger Kid revelation. Still blowing my mind.
Yes, guys. Some green room mind blowing will happen. Right. While you're at it, guys, please take a second. Leave us a rating and review wherever you find the pod, especially if it's Apple Podcast app. That helps us out a ton. We've seen more and more of you doing this. We love the reviews. We thank you guys for taking the time. It means the world to us. If you haven't, we'll still be happy when you do it. Thank you guys. Also, go subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can see our beautiful faces. That is Nerd Alchemist, plural with an S at the end. Fun content coming there. We're always working on new ideas. In fact, just before this, working on new ideas. So stay tuned. Also, next week, Jurassic Park. We'll just throw that in. And a specially added genetic tale. But back to business. The Island of Doctor Moreau. So let's just start, right?
Let's break down this warlock.
Let me start off with when I was a young boy, a young lad. We used to get taken to the library. And I was a bit of a problem child, right? I had some issues going on here and there, as I think I've discussed on the show. But one thing I always had was I found the Goosebumps book at an early age. Right. And I became an obsessive reader, right? Mm-hmm. Just constantly reading all the time. And my reading level is very good. Right. So one of the things my school and my mom, the counselors tried to do, I used to have to go to charter. If you're a Midwest kid, you remember charter.
Oh, charter behavioral school?
Yeah, it was like almost like a Walmart of fixing your fucked up relatives. Yeah. And so, I had an incident at school. I had to go to charter, right? So one of the things they came up with was this reading therapy. So I was allowed to go, venture out of the kids section and into the adult section to check out books in my local library. And it made me feel really cool about myself. I was really proud of myself. Well, I found this book and it had this wild cover, right? The Island of Doctor Moreau. And I was like, I'm ready for this. I'm, in 4th grade. I can handle this book. And so we went from the library, and I'm reading the book. It starts off, you're reading. And by the time we get to the furniture store my mom wanted to go to, I'm like, I'm just going to stay in the car and read the book. No big deal. Midwestern parking lot, pitch black outside. And I start getting to the meat of the book. I got so fucking scared. I threw the book down, waited, really searched the dark and the shadows to see if it would be okay if I sprinted from the minivan to the store. Because I couldn't tolerate to be alone in the dark. I was so fucking scared, right? Cried. My mom, you can't read this book anymore. You're punished, blah, blah. So that was my expectation. And then I was like, oh, my God, they made a movie of it. I can't wait to go see what they cooked up, right, as a teen boy. And this is the movie that came out. And I'm going to shock some people. I'm actually impressed at what they accomplished, all things considered.
Yeah, I think because we talked a lot about leading up to this. Griffey and I both talked a lot about the also documentary Lost Souls, yes. Which catalogs Richard Stanley's journey from making this dream project to not making this dream project to witnessing this project get sort of dismantled in front of him. But when you watch them both paired up, yes, it is honestly an unmitigated miracle that this movie made it a frame on screen, let alone onto my TV.
And I would say it has a coherent plot. I don't.
Sure.
It has what I think
it
is
the benefit of having
thing,
a book.
Well, right, but I mean, this is not exactly the book, right? It takes some liberties, as you will. Sure. What I think happened is when you lost Richard Stanley, who had a real emotional connection to this, right? He talks about in the Lost Soul documentary, seeing it as a young boy, the 70s version, and getting like aggressive and angry at how mad he was about this movie. He's like, I will someday do this.
Right.
So he's got a little heat, right? You know, it's the filmmaker
Hardware.
Dream. Yeah, which we covered on this show. We've done Hardware, and then he did Dust Devil.
So
he's got some heat, man. And he gets his shot, and he's like, I'm going to do my dream project, right? And through sheer determination and grit, he gets this thing off the ground. And what's really fun about the documentary is the phase where they're showing you all the wild ideas and something happens when a filmmaker is so in love and attached to the idea. I think one of the worst things that you see in movies, one of the things that I see in a movie and I just turn it off, is you can just tell that it feels like no one gives a fuck. It doesn't have to be a good movie, bad movie. I mean, it looks like someone's just making something. I turn it off. And he had extreme passion for it. Yeah. And I think the product we got on screen is so devoid of passion and emotion.
Yes.
While having a lot of really good stuff happening.
Yeah.
It's a hard movie to sort out in a way.
Well, I think that's the real crux of it too, is just, again, especially once you watch the documentary, you realize just how important it was to make this movie. Like, to me, this is the kind of thing, like, Richard Stanley, like, in the movie business we know of now, like, this isn't the kind of movie people generally try to make as, like, their third movie. Even though you got some heat, you're like, I'm not at that level yet. But, like, convincing everyone with, like, the artwork that he shows to us, and that he took around to studios to convince people to make this movie is fucking beautiful, man. Yeah. Like, that's, like, the kind of stuff you're like, I am jazzed to see that fucking movie. And it is weird because you do see this sort of disjointed thing happening on screen, which is, like, ultimately a movie that is like a husk of what they were trying to do. I can tell you my personal experience watching this movie when I was younger was
husk.
I mean, if I may be so bold, my personal experience watching this, like, I saw this movie when I was younger too, and here's why though, because I, like many of you, I saw, when we were allowed to go to the movie theaters, I went all the time. I saw Batman Forever like 7 times in the theater. And then when it came out on video, I was like, perfect, I am buying this VHS with no money. So I made my parents buy it for me. And because on old VHS tapes, they used to put trailers for movies that were coming out from the studio. And one of the movies was Island of Doctor Moreau because Val Kilmer was in it. So doing a little cross promoting. I was like, whoa, that movie looks fucking terrifying. I have to see it. And granted, I had known, like, I had read War of the Worlds when I was younger. And so I had known it was an H.G. Wells book. But I had never, like, really put a lot of effort into reading it. So I was like, I cannot wait to see this. And I watched it, and even as a young sprout, I sat there and I'm like, I'm not sure what this movie is. But I know that creature work is awesome. And that was the only thing I gleaned from it until I was much older.
Yeah, there is some... Well, that's the weird thing, right? So the movie is just exploding with talented people.
Oh, yeah.
Richard Stanley's still credited for a screenplay. And Richard Stanley, thank God, has made a comeback. We covered The Color Out of Space. Yep. Phenomenal. That's the kind of Richard Stanley. If he starts making a movie a year like that, we will be very fortunate at moviegoers, right?
Right.
You've got Frankenheimer, who did Manchurian Candidate. We recently talked about Ronin. Some big, impressive, and beloved
I can't believe this is the second Frankenheimer movie we're talking about.
Right. It's a bit of a leap in his filmography, right?
His oeuvre is certainly
Stan
different.
Winston doing all the creature work, right?
Mm-hmm.
His shop's helping do that, and he is one of the obvious kings of the creature work.
Yeah.
Ron Perlman's in it. You have, and then
Ron
Marlon Brando
Perlman
and Val Kilmer both, pantheon actors. Val Kilmer at the peak of his powers. Marlon Brando is this kind of Orson Welles-like legend, right, in the business. People admire him like a genius.
Both in size and genius.
Yeah, right. Like, they really had similar paths. I can't believe they never did. If this were now, they would have had a podcast about how much they hate every other movie, for sure.
Oh, 100%.
But it's just insane. Like, Ron Perlman, it took me like 20 minutes into the movie, or like, not even 20 minutes, probably midpoint. I'm like, wait, is Ron Perlman the hyena or the goat guy? Right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to suss it out. And that's the weird thing about this movie. You had talent everywhere you look, but what becomes so wildly clear is that no one seems to have any ground beneath their feet. No. Right? Everyone, the moment we meet Val Kilmer's character, he essentially makes no sense. Val Kilmer just runs hard on it, right? So we start off in a lifeboat, which becomes really odd later in the movie when they try to twist us up. So there's a lifeboat, and it starts with the classic, "The two men aboard my boat fought like beasts, not men." And there's blood in the boat, and they fall off, and he's by himself. I'm like, good start, good philosophical theme. I like this. Val Kilmer picks him up in the ocean and is just like, "Hey, what's up, bro? I'm hydrating you. Also, I'm giving you what I'll refer to as a veterinarian as Jimi Hendrix, because dogs love this humor." So he's just drugging him, hydrating him, and then it's like, "Hey, better come with me on this island or else the guys are going to rape you." And you're like, what is... Because this is what becomes weird is Val Kilmer, real early on, right, seems like he's, maybe he's like a Captain Ron type character, right? Not the case. He's apparently a real bad guy who's real bad at hiding his evil deeds, right?
I'm not past the Captain Ron thing yet.
You're stuck
at all.
I'm trying to move on with the analysis. You're stuck on Captain. But that's what I mean. He looks like a Captain Ron, right? Like a preppy Captain Ron. And then all of a sudden, right, he's like, "I had a rabbit as a boy. Whoops, I killed it. I'm British." And then Val Kilmer's like, yes. It just does a fucking neck snap. Yeah. And then we just move on like, he can still be my buddy, maybe.
Yeah, like it never fucking happened, by the way. It's just moving on. The movie runs at this pace of just like, well, we got to get to that scene. Well, let's get to the next thing. Like, it's such a weird, like, dogmatic way to edit a movie. It's like, all right, well, at minute 15, we're changing scenes here. Perfect.
This is the most literal saves the cat example.
Seriously, it looks like someone was just reading a book on editing. They're like, yes, right here around the 15-minute mark is where we need to transition into the rising action. I'm like, what is happening right now?
But this is the weirdest part of the movie. And I think what happens is, and this is why I think it all works for me, is because it's just people making really weird, horrible decisions, right? Constantly. Like, every actor's doing things that I'm like, no. Montgomery doesn't act that way. That's not how I accept this in the reality.
Right.
But because everyone's doing that, and everyone is doing things that make no sense, it all kind of congeals, and it becomes this Alice in Wonderland to me, where our lead actor, who essentially his whole job is to look befuddled and say Bible verses, right, becomes this avatar of a Richard Stanley, right, where he's like, I really just want to make this movie, but I'm caught between these absolutely fucking absurd human beings that are driving me actually insane. Like, he actually had a full mental breakdown and got fired, and I would say 90% of it is because Val Kilmer's a cock.
Yeah, that is, I think, the best part about the documentary, because, this movie didn't make anybody any money. So, like, the best part about it is just in general, like, you're looking at it, you're watching the documentary, and you're like, wow, everybody hated Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer was such a dick to everybody the entire time.
Right.
Like, you know for a fact it was his fault. You know for a fact he was the one who pushed everybody to the edge of sanity. So, and that's the best part is we haven't even gotten to Marlon Brando. Like,
well, we will, because there's a
but that's what I'm saying.
There is some actual look at what this foretold happening that is so amazing that, again, the movie also works as kind of this time capsule movie, right? And it's this curse. It has all these extra things, right? So as we're going through this weird, just... He has a Nobel like they're just doing weird shit, right? Oh, he has a Nobel Prize. Dead things everywhere. Oh, here's a hot young girl dancing to Enya while Val Kilmer blows on a purple flower. And you're just, in my mind, I'm like, what? Give me a bone. God damn it. And Val Kilmer locks the guy in his room, but does it in the most creepy way that ensures the guy's going to want to escape, right?
Right.
But then all of a sudden, we cut to, our lead escapes. He makes it into the lab, right? And we see some test tube people. And then we witness some hybrids helping, I believe it's a cow woman.
Yeah.
With many boobs, giving birth to a grotesque hybrid baby. And I immediately, as a viewer myself, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
Like I'm in for this. This is the movie I want.
Yeah.
Right?
Therein lies the real, that's like the thing that I love the most about this movie in general is because that is like the coup de grace of the whole thing. You could have literally shown me like another, 40 minutes of Val Kilmer blowing on a flower or just speaking in weird prophetic nothings about Jimi Hendrixing people. If I had gotten to a fucking cow, like Dr. Moreau cow baby birth, that's I'm like, this is awesome. Like that is just fucking classic cool.
Right. Because in that scene,
I love it.
They do capture what is the most scary about this theme, right? This is what becomes really fun about this Dr. Moreau, because it's not Dr. Moreau of the books per se, but this Dr. Moreau has this, he has this extra level, right? This feels like him and Montgomery, right? These people that were rejected by society, right?
Yeah. Taking
umbrage with God's creations more than they're not trying to be benevolent creators, right? In the book, I always thought of Moreau. They talk about this in the documentary too. Is that Moreau is more of this playing God figure, right? Right. But he was a lot more benevolent than the shockingly evil guy. And I think Brando, maybe it is weird because I was like, is Brando as good as people? Because he's one of those actors that everyone's like, he was the man, and you're like, yeah, I saw Streetcar. All right, not my story per se. On the Waterfront's an all-time favorite of mine. Like, he's great.
Right.
He had great roles, but people talk about Brando, and I think maybe we're just too young where I was like, I never all the way saw it or found it. Right. But then you watch something like this, and you're like, imagine this enormous, obese man just being rude and horrible. Right. Trying every fucking silly, stupid thing he can think of to not be in the movie, not work, ruin the product, not read the script. Yeah. And I think you could argue he's in 3 or 4 of the best scenes in the movie.
Totally. No, I think you absolutely can make that. Not only can you make that argument, but you can also, this is the thing is when people talk about genius, because again, I don't really know what that means a lot of the time. Like I've seen things that I think are genius.
All I know for sure is that people say it all the time and it's not.
Right.
Right.
But that to me is the crux. And I already said that, but that's the crux of Marlon Brando is he is bar none one of the biggest pieces of shit based on stories we've heard from this production.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't consider you a piece of shit if you're just lazy. Right. Right? We've learned that there are actual like Val Kilmer's a piece of shit.
Right. But But the fact that he didn't read the script and do all this shit, that is what makes Marlon Brando a fucking genius. Because if 3 of the 4 best scenes in the movie, or 4 really, of the best scenes in the movie have him in it. Yeah. And he's, again, you're totally right, making the wrong choices for every aspect of this movie.
Everything.
From the sunbonnet down, terrible choices all the way through.
That's what I mean. Okay,
and it's still a great performance.
So Brando in the white sunscreen and the face veil and shit, right?
Amazing.
That, what I like about that, and that's the weird thing, I don't believe that this was something he really thought out.
No.
To me, right? Like, I guess you could say he just felt it, but what it is it's just another way for him to raise his nose at what God has given us.
Right.
And you're like, this shockingly worked. Because then you start thinking, like 5 minutes later, he's in the thing and he interrupts a crucial moment in the movie, right? Here are the Beast People trying to hand over this guy who's seen too much in this horrific plain ghetto, right? With all these animal people. And Val Kilmer's just going to hand him the gun. Oh my God, this is ratcheting up. And then Brando's like, oh, the vapors. I can't handle the heat. Meet me at my house.
It's so hot. Don't you think it's hot? Like,
but you're like, so this massively obese fuck who hates the sun has just been doing this routine for 17 years. Like, he never thought, like, hey, they also don't have, governments in, like, the Arctic Circle. And I can just breed, like, polar bear and penguin people. Right? This fat guy who hates the sun. And you know that somewhere there's probably a sweat journal, right? Like totally. Marlon Brando's yellow Moreau journal where he's like, after I conquer the devil and the human gene, I'll conquer that sun, curses. And he's just like dripping grease on the book, right? Like that. Yeah. But it's a weird bad choice that I don't know if I believe that he really thought it out like that, but it fucking works. It works for me.
I think it's from the top down. Like, it barrels through the insanity of this movie and makes me continue to like there's some movies that are just so bad you think they're good. This is not one of them to me. Like, I don't think this movie is particularly good. However, I find this movie so fucking watchable that I have to continue to watch it. There's nothing about this movie that's going to make me turn it off. And that makes it...
That's an argument that me and you have all the time where you're like, I watched it, I can't stop watching it, but it sucks. I'm like, no. If it sucks, you would stop watching it.
But see, I don't like that edict of like so bad it's good. If it's good, it's good. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But like,
I'm not a guilty pleasure guy myself.
Yeah, I don't like the guilty pleasure movies. Like, I know the movies I like that people think suck. That's their fucking opinion. I don't care.
Said this. I'll say this every day. If someone like Nickelback, right, like this maligned item, and they came out with a song that slaps, I'm gonna be out tanning my pectorals, blasting Nickelback for everyone to hear, and I won't be ashamed of that. I won't be guilty.
It is what it is. And
if I like it, I like it.
And that's like the essence of the Island of Doctor Moreau.
This is the Nickelback of sci-fi Val Kilmer.
This movie is I wouldn't say, this movie is more of a seether of...
How dare you? This is not a seether or event horizon level, or vertical horizon.
Ooh. Oh, vertical. I
tried to throw another 90s one in.
This is not necessary. No, this isn't vertical horizon level. We're not there. This is closer to Seether, but
also,
getting
to
be
fair, if this was a band, right, like from that era, it would definitely be Mudvayne.
You think this would be Mudvayne?
Yeah, you'd be like, that's a lot of painting and hair choices. Why is this happening?
I'm going to tell you right now.
It'll be over soon.
the band that the Island of Doctor Moreau movie is in the 90s is definitely Saliva, and it's because of Marlon Brando. Sorry.
No. If you had said Sweat or something.
Nope, it's Saliva.
No, I'm telling you, look up Mudvayne.
Oh, no, I know what Mudvayne look like.
If you don't know who a Mudvayne is.
I know what they look like.
Tell me, just watch that one video where they're like, blah, 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 and they look almost like too weird to be cast as extras in Fury Road. That's kind of was their look. You know what I mean? But that one video to me sums up what happened in this.
Brando.
This is what I mean, though. Think of this, though. So Brando accidentally makes this movie iconic because he's also the guy we learned in the documentary who saw the tiny fellow, I believe they said was from Peru.
I think so.
He was some performer who had performed on TV shows, whatever they found him.
Yeah.
And on the way, because there was an aggrieved German actor who likes doing impressions in the documentary. He was mad. He was Miley, right? The smart dog boy at the end who blows everything up. He was supposed to have this big role. And he just got totally replaced because Moreau liked the idea, or Brando, not Moreau, Brando liked the idea.
Same difference after
of having this little guy. And what is the most iconic scene in this movie?
For me?
Everyone. It's the double pianos.
It's the double piano, yeah. Oh, and that's everybody's? I didn't know that was like, that's always the thing I remember.
Well, this became like a whole running motif. But what that scene does, what I think is really cool, that's the best Dr. Moreau scene too. Is because it shows you this fucking fat, sweaty heathen who hates the sun. He's kind of this like weird southern lady, right? Like you expect him to always be like, another lemonade. You know, he's like, the sun, the vapors, woo. Oh, my God, time. What did you just say?
Constantly, I think that.
Yeah, delicate, right? And he's, worried about, I love when he's talking. Because they have that really Texas Chainsaw Massacre-style dinner where it's just him and Val Kilmer just hating each other on screen while everyone sits uncomfortably. But what he says in that scene is pretty cool, right? Which is like, I saw the devil in my microscope and I've chained him. And so you just see this, like, real dainty, uppity guy who's just mad at everything not being the way he likes.
Right.
And he thinks that he has all this class. And so this guy sitting there playing piano while having his little abomination, right, who must just have a horrid life.
Yeah.
Like he's just this like twisted, gnarled bit of flesh. We see later they don't even always give him clothes. And he just dresses like Moreau and plays the piano with him. With his, like, gnarly hands. And you're like, that's the whole movie in an image. And I love any movie that can give me that one image. You're like, that covers everything that is cool about this idea.
There's another aspect of Brando's performance. And, like, it's always the thing he gets made fun of. Because, like, that's just, like, the tone of his voice. Mm-hmm. But when he was younger, the tone of his voice was very cool and, like, kind of sexy. Yeah. But as he got older and, like, in more, like, this bloated carcass of a man, it became, like, the perfect, like, high sort of wispy fat guy voice because
he was like the first Karen.
Yeah, no, he's definitely the first Karen. Like
Dr.
100%.
Moreau in this movie is the first Karen.
He's the first Karen. He doesn't want to go outside, but he wants to bitch and complain about everybody. Like that whole bit of him sitting there and just going like, God, dude, I fucking absolutely adore that whole monologue where he's like, I saw the devil in a microscope.
Like, but that's great. And he says he chained him.
It's great. Like, it's a really good monologue. And, like, again, it's a great monologue trapped in the weirdest body, face, scene, and movie ever.
As Val Kilmer just stares in disgust. Well, Val Kilmer's doing his best prop comedy with, like, rabbit legs and shit.
With that fucking rabbit leg thing.
What
I'm like,
strange.
What is going on?
But that is why this works, is because in a movie full of genetically made hybrid abominations that are questioning to the heavens, what am I? The weirdest shit that ever appears on screen happens from Brando or Kilmer.
I know.
We see a cow lady give birth and you go, oh! And like, within 5 minutes you're like, wait, what is Marlon Brando wearing? And you totally forget the fucking horrific birth scene that you just saw.
That is truly and honestly the magic of this movie. And that's 100% why it's worth watching. Because, again, you sit there, you watch this movie, and the weirdest thing is not the cow baby being born. It's not like this is the craziest thing. The beautiful, awesome Stan Winston work is almost second fiddle to what the fuck Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer are doing with each other in this movie. Like, the actor standoff those two are having constantly, because like, it's just, and I'm not even saying that because we watched the documentary and that all that shit going on behind the scenes, that deep down Val Kilmer's like, this fucking guy's washed up, I'm gonna fucking act his ass off the screen. And I'm like, that's what it's doing. These two are just like one-upping their crazy and not tolerating each other. It's so great.
Well, they talked about in the doc, right, like they wouldn't leave the trailer first, so like they would just wait and like stall production for hours because they were in like a standoff over who's the lesser actor.
Awesome.
And it's just but you know what is really funny about it now, and this is why it works as a bit of a Hollywood time capsule, is you actually see Val Kilmer, who's being just an unbearable monster on this set, right?
Right.
Just being a horrible douche. And he's staring at the man who is possibly one of the most legendary, hard to work with douches in all of Hollywood, right?
Right.
But because he did so much great work early, he is revered as a legend, right?
Right.
Because that's the thing. If you do that before you're a famous legend, you're an asshole and no one hires you. Right. If you do some good work first, then you're just an eccentric genius, right? But Brando's just this unbearable ball of difficulty, right? And Val Kilmer's sitting there staring at that and has no awareness to go, that's not the legacy I hope to leave behind.
Right.
And just a week ago, the newspapers were releasing, hey, Val Kilmer's sorry, he's overweight, he's had surgery, and he wants to like be friends with everyone again. And you're Brando. He's actually in real life just become Brando.
Yeah.
And he's burnt so many bridges, and he's such a piece of shit. Like, who knows? But he also still has, there are still guys like me that would hope for a Val Kilmer comeback, you know?
Absolutely.
But like the fact that these two are on screen and he had no awareness
of
the path he was on is insanity.
I think that level of lack of awareness is probably the thing that makes him so fascinating in this movie. Because again, he's just constantly trying to ratchet up this insanity over Marlon Brando on the screen. I think that's the thing I kind of begrudgingly respect about these performances between the two of them, is because they're constantly trying to out crazy on camera the other one. Like,
but you know what's strange,
they don't even care.
Is that Brando's craziness, like here's the example of Brando's craziness, right? Like one, yes, of course, he is this guy who wants them to be vegetarian and follow laws. Meanwhile, he's just butchering and breaking every law. Right. That's the absurd, like, dark, scary villain version of Moreau, right? What this movie actually does, though, here's the scene where you just are watching and you're like, what the fuck? Marlon Brando's Dr. Moreau wakes up in the middle of the night in just like a big, sweaty, fat guy robe. Goes down and gets some milk and cookies. He hears his house being raided by monsters, right? That it should not be in his compound at all. Right. Banging on the computer, and he comes out and he's like, hey, what's up, guys? That reminds me of this one artist who plays terrible piano music. And it takes him minutes to think that he might be in trouble, right? To just, like, be like, oh, wow, that piano monologue was not the right thing. They're bleeding on my floor. I don't have the Zappa. And it's just like, what? But just Brando sauntering, waddling in his boxers and robes, like, oh, yeah, let's bro out on the piano. Right. That is the insanity that he brought to this character. And again, it's a terribly stupid decision, but it completely works for the character he makes.
Exactly.
Val Kilmer's equivalent is, hey, I put the circuit board for the communications array on my head. You know?
I mean,
I guess the subtle crazy Val Kilmer moment that really haunts you is him just like giving the drugs and making out with the pig ladies.
Oh, dude, that
and
is
they just absolutely tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that Montgomery is just definitely bumping it with these hybrid ladies, like 100%. Getting high as fuck and bumping it with the ladies.
Getting like super high and nailing pig ladies. That's like, oh yeah, because so I saw that and I was like, fuck, dude. At the very beginning, was that little cow baby half him?
Like, it already came out demanding a bigger trailer. I want a big old cattle trailer.
I honestly, like, that was like the first thought I had, especially on this round. I was like, oh, did he fuck the cow lady too? Does he have sex with every single one of them except for Fairuza Balk?
Yeah. The only one who looks like an actual attractive human being.
God, dude.
No, you know what is the worst? This actually just struck me too. He actually spends his last scenes in the movie doing a fuck you impression of Marlon Brando.
Yeah, exactly.
That scene is actually wild because he puts the shirts under.
He puts the shirts on, and he puts the fucking makeup on. Like, that's the thing that I think is the
That's
best
probably
part.
the only day he showed up early to set. He's like, "Oh, I'm ready to shoot today.
Oh, I'm ready. Let's get this on, man." Brando's not here, I got a killer impression.
But that's the difference, right? That scene is wild, and then he starts doing the like, like, 90s, I'm going to like separate by being crazy acting.
Right.
But then they have to add that he's just like, well, I better go to my drug orgy where we saw was formerly some kind of animal church or court of law. That's where the sayer of the law holds his
Poor sayer of the law.
Yeah, the sayer of the law is like, oh, what's up, Montgomery? You coming to talk legal standards and practices? And he's like, yeah, actually, we're just all going to do a fuckload of drugs and bang. And the sayer of the law is like, gross, I'll be at the dock. Like, he just goes down to, like, their sacred land to do drugs and have an orgy. And it's awesome. But it's awesome, and that's what the difference is Val Kilmer playing crazy. You're like, wow, look at him going for it. Marlon Brando, it just felt very natural and real.
I think that's the thing. Marlon Brando, it feels very authentic. And then I watch Val Kilmer do it, and I'm like, well, it's a good thing Val Kilmer's acting. Glad he didn't have to blend in too much into this role.
And I like Val. I'm not trying to just shit on
Kilmer.
No,
I like Val Kilmer
he
too.
has one of my favorite lines in the movie, which is when the dog man comes back, right? The guy who just turns real fast, like real happy to turn and start hunting and killing.
Yeah.
And he shows up to Val Kilmer, and Val just grabs him, and he goes, I hear what he says. He's like, what's up, dog? Or something like ridiculous. And he just goes, well, this didn't work out. And I was like, that should have been on the fucking poster.
That should have been the poster.
Well, this didn't work out. That
didn't
didn't work out. Oh, my God.
That, I think, is probably... it's between that and David Thewlis screaming in the radio box room. Like, those are the two... Those are the microcosms of not just making the movie, but the movie in general right there. Because David Thewlis is all of us screaming, what the fuck is going on in this movie? And
like when they just have the rat humans that are really rat-sized, and we don't ever find out, is that a dream? Is that real? Like, it's just, we'll leave those over there. We never see those rat people again.
Never has to be addressed. I haven't. It's bananas.
But that's what I mean, though, is that what I think you see, though, is that the biggest critique I have of the movie, right? And the thing that I think is the hardest and why it probably doesn't work for most people is because they just take all of they completely flatten all of the hybrids. The hybrids don't matter in this movie at all. What they do is they take a little bit of time to set up a pretty obvious symbolism of slavery and, race relations, right?
Right.
That's as much as they want to go into it. And then they have one guy screaming, what am I? But there's no real pondering, right?
That's
especially
the problem.
Even from, what's her name? Veruza Balk's character.
Veruza Balk, who's...
You're like, okay, so you're in between both worlds and you're regressing. Right. Talk me through that.
Well, and I think that's the problem, and that's the main issue with the movie is the pathos that we are supposed to be following is of these hybrid people, because then it actually matters.
Right.
I think the issue is that we spend so much time with these horrible, horrible, horrible humans and they are ratcheting up the crazy nonstop. Like even David Thewlis is turning in this bizarre performance of I don't. But it's Pendrix, the character, right? I don't get it at all.
Well, at one point he's like, "Oh wait, I was kidnapped and brought to the lab," and I was like, "Wait, Val Kilmer's already a horrible drug vet. He couldn't bring any fucking. Why can't he bring one of those pirates? It had to be some fucking uppity British dude who was on a life."
Yeah, apparently the Somalian pirate brigade just avoided the island of Doctor Moreau completely. Right.
Val Kilmer's these guys are ruffians. You don't want to see ruffian in the microscope. No way. But yeah, that's what I think. And I think all of the Moreau movies have suffered from this, right? Is you're following a man, right, who represents us in our modern society, going to an island and being appalled at what he sees, right? This is an abomination to science and blah, blah, blah. And the kind of underlying theme of Moreau always is, we're not any better than these creatures, right?
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I like that, right? I kind of like the cynical science fiction, but that's fine. Okay, so if that's the case, you have to spend a little more time and effort showing me moments of the hybrids being more human than Montgomery and Moreau, and I would argue they don't do that once in this movie.
No.
Because that's the problem, is you get the feeling that probably the best of the hybrids is the Azazalo, right? The dog guy who's the hunter. He likes to hunt.
Is that how you say it? Azello?
Azello? Something like that?
I don't know.
So he's the one who shoots, Lomai, the cheetah person who eats people, and he's like, oh, sorry, I thought you wanted me to protect everyone, Father. That's a good, really interesting hybrid person moment, right? In his, burning Lomai's carcass and then kind of sniffing it and smiling like, that tastes good.
Yeah.
That is great hybrid people stuff, right? Because now we're fascinated by, where is the line? And that's the but, that might be as much as we get. And what they do, which sucks, is they show the rest of them living in, like, this squalor. Mm-hmm. And they show us the sayer of the law who seems like he's not thinking and only parroting whatever Moreau told him until the last scene, right?
Right.
Then he kind of gets it. And all the other hybrids are just worried about pain. What are we? But in no interesting, relatable way.
Right. I think that's like, because this is always the thing, because to me, they're not the same thing, but to me, like, Animal Farm and the Island of Doctor Moreau address sort of the same general concepts of, like, are we no better than the beasts of the land, like so on, and like that kind of thing. And the true villains are the humans, so on and so forth. So to not address that at all and literally make this about, like, who's the crazier person on the island, like, we all know who the craziest person on the island is. He's literally sitting there not sunbathing and like, or he's the guy who's dressed like, Captain Ron, like you said, and like dosing people and fucking pig ladies. Like, that's the problem.
I want to see some hybrid guys like, well, I'm wheeling in another industrial-sized drum of SPF 70, but, Captain Ron's over there just fucking slapping my mom's 8 tits around. This is not my favorite. Like, this island sucks.
Like, where's the sequel? Where's the sequel that they go live in, like, Wales or something like that and have a much better life?
Where's the angsty ass, like, skunk teen gang? It talks about all the things they don't like.
Where's the Island of Doctor Moreau, directed by, like, Steve McQueen? Like, that's the sequel,
That's true. All the hybrids are just Michael Fassbender's monster hog. Hey-oh, good for you, Fassbender. No, that's where the movie, because I think Brando and Kilmer are impossible to take your eyes off of, right? In this really strange way. The hybrids are really cool for the most part. Like, I liked Hyena. I like this, peeling your, button out so you can't feel the pain anymore is a cool enough concept. I liked where this was going, right? The action's fine. Yeah. It's not particularly scary, but it's a fun, like, slow build, thrilling conclusion. Mm-hmm. But then this, like, the prime example of how they failed the hybrids is at the end when they just throw the Pussycat lady. They just hang her, like, in no time. Like, they're about to make their valiant stand. She starts going, meow! Like, we're about to get some, like, cat kung fu. Moreau's like, you don't know how strong you are. And the dog boy's like, I wish you had also gotten spanked. Neck snap. It's like, well, that's weird. Yeah. Because when that movie ends, that's the problem. When they kill her, you are truly, absolutely left with no one else to care about or like in the whole movie.
Well, yeah. I think that's the main problem with the movies. That's like the bigger problem with the ending is just you have to finish the movie.
Yeah, like when they kill her, you're like, all right, so I'm guessing the white guy will pull through because 90s, right? And you're like, what else are we doing? Like, what else is happening?
Yeah. Well, like once you kill the cat lady, you're kind of like, okay.
She was the one though that was reverting back and could have overcome the traumas of whatever he had done to them. I think that's the thing, right? And that's why I think making the switch from Richard Stanley, who feels like the kind of guy who would really understand the mindset of these hybrids, right? Like his journey, outsider, feeling oppressed by the Hollywood system.
Right.
I think he would have given us a lot more of that, right?
Right.
And I think some of what Brando did as Moreau comes from Richard Stanley's vision. But then you just see that when you bring a guy like Frankenheimer in who doesn't really like this genre, doesn't care for the script, and he's like, hey, I just got to get us from A to B, that's what is happening.
Yeah, no,
right?
exactly.
And all of the emotional beats
right.
that are, in most movies, they don't feel like they fit this world.
No, and I mean, I think what you're getting when you get a John Frankenheimer who comes in and makes a movie like this has to like pick up the pieces and start over essentially. Yeah. But what you're getting is, like a real paint by numbers movie about like plotting, and like you get this soulless thing in a movie that should be all about the soul. What is the soul of a man? Like that's like the entire point of the book itself. So
also it's kind of the entire debate of genetics, right?
Exactly.
We can create
the entirety.
New bodies, we can make our bodies stronger, whatever. But if we don't fix the soul, are we fixing any of the problems, right?
Right. So to just like
fuck that.
Yeah. So for John Frankenheimer to come and be like, I just want to finish the movie. I don't give a shit what this movie's about. For him literally to push
get the reindeer
everything
games,
aside.
goddammit.
Yeah, and like again, it's just I would really anybody who's listening to this, go watch this documentary about it. Like cuz it's fascinating because rarely do you get people in this business because look, I work in this business. I can tell you right now, rarely do you want to get people this candid because honestly, when you do, you like put your career at stake telling people the truth. Everyone in this fucking movie is telling the truth, and it's fascinating.
Like, a lot of them are like, yeah, we don't work anymore. You want to hear some shit?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, when you look at like, I think about the Fairuza Balk interview, that first AD getting interviewed, and then even Rob Morrow, who still worked fairly consistently at that point. Like, when I look at those things, particularly Fairuza Balk's, where she tells the story about how she fucking bailed as soon as she found out Richard Stanley got fired. She drove she got a limo and drove all the way to fucking Sydney. And her agent called and said, if you fucking quit this movie, you will never work again. Yeah, they will find a way to ruin your career and you'll never work. So she fucking trucked it back and dealt with the Frankenheimer of it all. Because the other thing is John Frankenheimer is, as everyone says in the doc, is like an old school director. John Frankenheimer's from that school of directing where you yell at everyone to get things done. And that's like sort of the bizarre dichotomy of the movie. So you wonder like what version of this movie that you'd get from Richard Stanley. And I think what we've been talking about, what's been missing from this movie that would make it what we think would be more palatable, that's what you would get from Richard Stanley. That's what you get from Richard Stanley movies. What you don't get.
That's the thing though, right? You're onto it right there. Is if you took because it sounds like neither actor was directed at all, right?
No.
So you take the weird Brando Kilmer shit as these two kind of archetypes for bad humans.
Right.
Let them run wild and then just surround them with an art house island full of these fucking beasts and creatures that, while they look scary, are actually forming a culture and have, their own ethics and things like that, like real serious debates. And watching humans tromp through that environment with a lot of style and flair. Yeah, I think this movie would have been so much more. And it's literally impossible to say that Richard Stanley his movie would have been way better than this.
No,
because who fucking knows if he would have even been able to pull it off at that stage.
Right. I mean, and that's like the real tragedy of a movie like this is it's a classic piece of literature that you could have turned into something that you can turn into something really great. And I think that's the saddest part is we'll never know what Richard Stanley really could have done. Like, I didn't know this. Like, I was looking through the cast list. The people that he cast as the main animals animal people are fucking incredible. Like, the guy who played Jango Fett was Azazello. Mm-hmm. Like Ron Perlman, Mark Dacascos. He was in he's in John Wick 3. Like he was Mei-Ling, like those, or was he? I don't remember. Either way, like you can't tell, but those performances I bet probably would have been incredible. but we'll never see them.
But
like, you have great actors.
Yeah, and I think that's what is the hardest part about this movie is, again, when I saw it as a kid, I just remember like, that was fun, right? It's, interesting to watch. It's got some wild imagery. It's a fun, serviceable version of that story.
Right.
But again, I never felt that tear that I felt reading the book, man. That's one of those things that like reached into my soul and scared the fuck out of me, right? That I felt unsafe in this world, that nature was out there waiting for me no matter what I did, right?
Right.
And I think that becomes the hardest part is as a young guy who was really affected by that book, and I went back and finished it later once I became real tough. No big deal. Once I became super tough and cool, I finished it, and it's great. And also a guy, who's been writing scripts and trying to make a movie for a long fucking time, wildly unsuccessfully, as is obvious. Watching a guy have that much passion and get that fucking close and not be able to push it over the line is brutal, man.
Yeah.
And it's weird because when you watch Dr. Moreau, I think it's more obvious than other movies. But then you start thinking about other movies you've seen that take shit, and then, now with the internet we hear more about, fighting between directors and executives and all the cuts and whatever. And you start realizing how much you can put into something and still, not reach the pinnacle or the finish line. Is that really becomes brutal, man. Very much like Moreau. You're like, I'm this close. I found the devil. I'm this close. I don't know. I was like, your daughter seems pretty good.
Yeah, she's all right. And then,
they hinted that the British guy was like, he said I didn't know how close he was. I was like, oh, he's a clone. I'm like, oh, no, wait, he's clone juice for cat daughter? That's fine. I'm not going to try to comprehend, right? But you start doing this thing, and all of a sudden, Richard Stanley, Marlon Brando, just becomes this bloated, beaten down carcass for the monsters of this island to eat.
Right.
And it's just fucking brutal, man. But, that's the weird thing is I still find it captivating. I can't ever, I've watched it a lot more than you would imagine. It's just captivating.
I'm still entertained. I don't know what else to say. I'm still entertained.
Yeah. It's just, but this movie, again, it's kind of that, the alchemy that we talk about on this show is you can take so many weird things and flaws and whatever, and sometimes they just come together right. And I feel like this movie is just an never-ending string of failures and heartbreak that somehow yield a pretty entertaining romp that then leads to a really good documentary, right? And I don't know. I think it's a fun one. I dig it.
It's fun.
All right, guys. That's enough for Dr. Moreau. We got to get off this fucking island. We hope that you had as much fun on the island as we did. Again, watch The Island of Dr. Moreau. And make sure to watch Lost Souls, man. It's a documentary about Richard Stanley's struggles through that. And it's even more fun to watch now that we know that he has returned and is now going to be doing a Cthulhu universe for us. A Lovecraft.
It's free on Amazon Prime, guys.
Yeah, so it's not as sad as it was the first time I saw it because Richard Stanley's back. Yeah. So now it becomes a triumphant underdog story, man. So, watch those. Again, like we said, check out our episode from earlier this week with director Josh Lobo. Check out his film, I Trapped the Devil. And go back and download our talk about the movie Green Room. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you find podcasts. Follow our YouTube channel, Nerd Alchemist, for more fun stuff coming your way. See our hybrid faces. I don't know if there was a hybrid you thought you looked most like. I was like, I'm feeling that bison guy lately. Like, I feel the bison guy.
Oh, I definitely went with bison guy.
Yeah, I was like, that. It's just an ordeal. I feel very sweaty a lot. It's fine.
Yeah. Bison guy also has that half cocked face. I'm like, I feel like that a lot of the time. Yeah.
I've been there with you, bison brother. But okay, so all that, guys, we finish the Pod Edits Genetics Month with the granddaddy of them all, the masterpiece of genetic storytelling, Jurassic Park. Also, we're adding one more genetic tale early next week. We both just found it, watched it, and I think it's going to be a really fun conversation. a movie called All That We Destroy by Chelsea Stardust. It was part of Hulu's Into the Dark line of films. And it's a really fascinating movie. Again, like Dr. Moreau, things can get messy and convoluted when you're, playing God. But a really interesting movie that I think is going to make a fun conversation. So we'll have both of those for you next week to wrap up our Edit Genetic theme. So for the Film Alchemist, I'm Josh Griffey.
I'm Alex Dandino.